The encrypted radio burst crackled through the night air over Helmand Province, its digital static masking what would become one of the most controversial friendly fire investigations in recent military history. At 3:47 hours, a lone A-10 Thunderbolt II circled through the darkness above a Taliban stronghold, its pilot completely unaware that the coordinates streaming across her targeting display were 17 degrees off true north. The mistake should have killed 8 American Special Operations soldiers sleeping in a mud brick compound 12 kilometers away. Instead, it revealed something far more extraordinary about the woman flying that aircraft. Captain Kestrel Ghost Nakamura had earned her call sign not through stealth, but through something the old-timers in her squadron couldn't quite explain. During her first deployment, she developed an uncanny ability to remember terrain features with photographic precision, mapping landscapes in her mind like ancient navigators reading stars. Her colleagues initially dismissed it as pilot bravado, until the night she guided 3 lost helicopters back to base using nothing but radio descriptions of rock formations she'd memorized weeks earlier. The rescued crews started calling her Ghost because she seemed to move through hostile airspace like she belonged there, invisible to enemy radar but somehow seeing everything below. Tonight, that extraordinary gift would be tested in ways no military training could prepare for. The mission briefing had been routine, close air support for SEAL Team 7, conducting a high-value target elimination deep in the Sangin Valley. Intelligence suggested the compound housed a Taliban bomb maker responsible for killing dozens of coalition forces. The coordinates looked standard, properly formatted and triple-checked through normal channels. What nobody knew was that a single corrupted data packet had shifted every number by exactly 17 degrees, a technical glitch so precise it appeared intentional. As Ghost banked her A-10 into position, something felt wrong. The landscape below didn't match her mental map of the target area. The wadi running east-west should have curved north after the abandoned village. The ridge line was too steep, the vegetation too sparse. Her instrument panel showed green lights across the board, GPS coordinates locked and verified, but 15 years of flying over Afghanistan had taught her to trust her instincts over technology. Blackbird 6, this is Ghost requesting verification on target coordinates, she transmitted, her voice steady despite growing unease. The response came back immediate and confident. Coordinates confirmed, cleared hot for engagement, danger close authorization granted. 8 American lives hung in the balance 17 degrees away, sleeping in a compound that exactly matched the intelligence photos she'd studied before takeoff. The Taliban stronghold spread out below her like a tactical exercise diagram. Guard towers positioned exactly as briefed, vehicles parked in precise locations. Even the ammunition cache her thermal imaging highlighted matched intelligence reports perfectly. Everything was right, except the geography surrounding it was completely wrong. Ghost rolled inverted and pulled her aircraft into a steep dive, thumb hovering over the weapon release trigger. Standard protocol demanded she trust the technology, trust the chain of command, trust the intelligence apparatus that had never failed her squadron before. But something deeper, an intuition forged through countless hours of studying this unforgiving landscape, screamed that she was about to kill the wrong people. The radio crackled again. Ghost, you are cleared hot. I say again, cleared hot for immediate engagement. Time compressed into crystalline moments as Captain Nakamura made a decision that would define the rest of her career. She pulled back on the stick, climbing away from the target instead of engaging, her GAU-8 Avenger cannon silent beneath the aircraft's nose. Negative, Blackbird 6. Request immediate coordinate verification through secondary channels. Her voice carried a new tension that made the forward air controller pause mid-transmission. Ghost had never questioned orders before, never hesitated when Americans were in danger, never prioritized her own doubts over mission requirements. The silence that followed her refusal stretched across the radio frequency like a held breath. Minutes ticked by as Ghost maintained her orbit above the suspect compound. Fuel gauges showed adequate reserves for another hour of loiter time, but every second of delay potentially compromised the ground operation. Through her night vision system, she could see movement in the buildings below, figures running between structures, vehicles starting engines, the unmistakable signs of a camp preparing for evacuation. If these were legitimate targets, her hesitation was allowing high-value enemies to escape. The secondary coordinate verification came back exactly matching the original transmission. Target confirmed. Engagement authorized. Minimal collateral damage risk assessed. Ghost stared at her displays, cross-referencing GPS data with the terrain features etched in her memory. The disconnect remained absolute. According to her instruments, she was exactly where she needed to be. According to her experience, she was about to bomb innocent people. Ghost, this is Blackbird 6. You have 8 American operators in immediate contact with enemy forces. They need that air support now. The urgency in the controller's voice cut through her hesitation like artillery shrapnel. SEAL Team 7 wasn't conducting a routine raid. They were fighting for their lives somewhere in the darkness below, and she was their only hope for survival. Captain Nakamura closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds, allowing her mind to reconstruct the detailed topographical maps she'd studied obsessively throughout her deployment. Every ridge line, every village, every dry riverbed in a 50-kilometer radius existed in her memory with cartographer precision. She opened her eyes and rolled her aircraft toward the coordinates burning in her consciousness, not the ones on her targeting display, but the ones her experience told her were correct. Blackbird 6, Ghost is rolling in hot on coordinates I'm transmitting now. Her fingers flew across the communication panel, manually broadcasting GPS data that differed from the original mission parameters by exactly 17 degrees. The response was immediate and explosive. Ghost, negative. Do not engage those coordinates. You are not cleared for that target area. But she was already diving, her A-10's twin engines screaming as she descended through the thin mountain air toward a compound she couldn't see but knew was there. At 8,000 feet, her forward-looking infrared system painted the real target on her displays. The compound materialized exactly as she'd visualized it, nestled in the correct wadi with the proper ridge line orientation. Muzzle flashes strobed from multiple positions around the perimeter, the unmistakable signature of a firefight in progress. 8 American operators were pinned down inside that compound, fighting against overwhelming odds while their designated air support circled uselessly 17 degrees away. Ghost pickled off her first pair of Maverick missiles at 3:52 hours, watching through her targeting pod as the precision-guided weapons obliterated 2 machine gun positions that had been suppressing the SEAL team's movement. The explosions bloomed like deadly flowers in her thermal display, their heat signatures painting the landscape in stark black and white contrasts that revealed more enemy positions than intelligence had identified. Ghost, what the hell are you doing? The radio transmission carried barely controlled fury from her squadron commander, who was monitoring the engagement from the Tactical Operations Center. She had just delivered ordnance to coordinates unauthorized by higher headquarters, potentially committing an act of insubordination that could result in court-martial proceedings. Saving American lives, sir. Her response was calm, professional, and absolutely certain. Ghost rolled into her second attack run, this time targeting a mortar position that was walking rounds dangerously close to the compound, where SEAL Team 7 had taken defensive positions. The 30 rounds from her GAU-8 cannon stitched across the enemy emplacement like a deadly typewriter, silencing the indirect fire that threatened to overrun the American position. The radio frequency exploded with overlapping transmissions as various command elements tried to regain control of the situation. Legal officers wanted immediate clarification on her authority to engage unauthorized targets. Intelligence analysts demanded to know how she'd acquired alternate coordinates. Squadron leadership insisted she return to base immediately for debriefing and possible disciplinary action. Through it all, Ghost continued her attack runs with methodical precision, systematically eliminating the Taliban forces that had surrounded SEAL Team 7. Her ammunition expenditure was textbook efficient. No wasted ordnance, no unnecessary destruction, just the precise application of firepower required to neutralize specific threats. Each weapon release was accompanied by detailed battle damage assessment reports that demonstrated her complete understanding of the tactical situation below. The breakthrough came at 3:58 hours when SEAL Team 7 finally managed to establish clear radio communication with their overhead support. Ghost, this is Viper 7 Actual. Outstanding work on those gun positions. Request immediate reattack on mortar pit bearing 270 degrees from our position. The transmission confirmed what Ghost already knew. She had found the correct target and was providing effective close air support to American forces in contact. But the confirmation also revealed the magnitude of the coordinate error that had nearly resulted in friendly fire casualties. The original target coordinates would have placed her weapons exactly on top of a coalition forward operating base 12 kilometers away, where 8 different units were conducting routine operations, completely unaware of their proximity to a designated target area. The mistake hadn't been random. Someone or something in the intelligence chain had systematically altered every coordinate by the same precise offset. Ghost acknowledged Viper 7's request and rolled into her final attack run, expending her remaining ordnance on the mortar position that continued threatening the SEAL team's extraction route. Her last missile impact was followed by a secondary explosion that indicated the destruction of a significant ammunition cache, far larger than intelligence had suggested would be present at the target site. As she climbed away from the engagement area, Ghost transmitted her post-strike report with clinical detachment that masked the emotional weight of her decision. She had disobeyed direct orders, engaged unauthorized targets, and potentially violated multiple articles of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. But 8 American operators were alive because she had trusted her memory over her instruments, her experience over official channels, her instincts over institutional authority. The flight back to base stretched across an hour of radio silence punctuated only by mandatory position reports to air traffic control. Ghost knew that landing would bring immediate interrogation, formal investigations, and career consequences that might end her military service. But as she watched the sunrise paint the Hindu Kush mountains in shades of gold and crimson, she felt no regret for the choice she'd made in the darkness above Sangin Valley. Her fuel gauges showed reserves adequate for normal landing procedures as she entered the traffic pattern at Bagram Air Base. Ground control directed her to a maintenance area isolated from normal operations, the standard procedure for aircraft returning from controversial engagements. Security forces vehicles were already positioning around the designated parking spot, their blue lights flashing in the early morning light like harbingers of the bureaucratic storm awaiting her arrival. Ghost shut down her engines and completed her post-flight checklist with the same methodical attention to detail that had characterized her entire military career. Every switch position was verified, every system properly secured, every maintenance discrepancy carefully documented in the aircraft forms. The routine tasks provided psychological anchor points, as she prepared to face questions about decisions made in the heat of combat that now seemed impossible to explain in the sterile environment of administrative review. The crew chief who met her aircraft wore an expression of barely contained excitement mixed with professional concern. Word had already spread through the maintenance crews about the unauthorized engagement, but the details remained classified at levels beyond their security clearance. All they knew was that Ghost had returned from a mission that generated more radio traffic than any engagement in recent memory, and that senior officers were requesting immediate access to her aircraft's mission data recorders. "Ma'am, they want you in the squadron conference room as soon as you complete your debrief with intelligence," the crew chief reported while conducting his initial post-flight inspection. Ghost nodded acknowledgement and gathered her flight gear, knowing that the intelligence debrief would be the first of many formal interviews about her actions over Sangin Valley. The walk from the flight line to the squadron building felt longer than usual, each step carrying her further from the clear certainties of aerial combat toward the ambiguous complexities of military justice. Other pilots watched her passage with expressions ranging from admiration to concern, but none approached for the informal conversation that typically followed controversial missions. The invisible barriers of ongoing investigation had already begun isolating her from the squadron community that had been her professional family. Captain Nakamura paused outside the intelligence office, studying her reflection in the bulletproof glass that protected the secure facilities. The face looking back at her showed no visible signs of the internal transformation that had occurred during the past 4 hours. She still looked like the competent but unremarkable pilot who had attended the routine mission briefing the previous evening. But something fundamental had changed in the darkness above Afghanistan. She had discovered the courage to trust herself over systems, intuition over authority, personal responsibility over institutional protection. The intelligence debrief lasted 3 hours and covered every aspect of her engagement with methodical thoroughness that revealed the seriousness of the situation. Analysts wanted detailed explanations for her coordinate corrections, tactical reasoning behind each weapon employment, and complete timeline reconstruction of her decision-making process throughout the engagement. Ghost answered every question with precision while carefully avoiding speculation about the source of the original coordinate errors. The most difficult moment came when the lead analyst asked directly whether she believed the coordinate discrepancy had been intentional sabotage or systemic technical failure. Ghost paused for nearly 30 seconds before responding that she lacked the technical expertise to make such determinations, but that the precision of the 17-degree offset suggested something beyond random equipment malfunction. Her answer triggered a flurry of note-taking and whispered consultation between the analysts that indicated her observation had significant implications for ongoing investigations. The meeting concluded with standard admonitions about discussing classified information and instructions to remain available for additional questioning as the formal inquiry proceeded. The squadron conference room felt smaller than usual when Ghost entered to find her commanding officer, the base legal officer, and 2 investigators from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations waiting for her arrival. The formal arrangement of personnel around the polished conference table made clear that this meeting represented far more than routine post-mission review. She was facing the preliminary stages of what could become a general court-martial for disobedience of lawful orders. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Spike Rodriguez had commanded the squadron for 18 months and had never encountered a situation quite like Captain Nakamura's unauthorized engagement. His initial impulse was to support his pilot's tactical decision-making while simultaneously protecting her from the legal consequences of insubordination. But the complexity of the coordinate error and its implications for operational security made such straightforward leadership impossible. "Ghost, I want to understand exactly what happened out there," he began, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of a commander walking the line between support and discipline. "Walk me through your thought process from the moment you arrived on station until you engaged the unauthorized coordinates." Ghost's response was delivered with the same clinical precision that had characterized her intelligence debrief, but her squadron commander detected emotional undertones that revealed the personal cost of her decision. She had not acted from reckless disregard for authority, but from a profound sense of responsibility for American lives that superseded concern for her own career consequences. The legal officer interrupted periodically to clarify specific details that would be relevant to potential charges, but his questions seemed designed more to understand the situation than to build a prosecution case. Ghost began to suspect that higher authorities were more concerned with understanding how the coordinate errors had occurred than with punishing the pilot who had corrected them. The turning point came when one of the OSI investigators revealed that preliminary analysis of the mission data had confirmed Ghost's assessment of the coordinate discrepancy. The original target location would indeed have resulted in friendly fire casualties at a coalition forward operating base, while her corrected coordinates had accurately identified the actual Taliban stronghold where SEAL Team 7 had been engaged. Captain Nakamura, the investigator continued, we need to understand how you identified the correct coordinates when multiple verification systems confirmed the erroneous data. Your accuracy suggests access to intelligence sources beyond those provided through normal channels. Ghost recognized that her answer to this question would determine whether she faced charges for insubordination or commendation for exceptional performance under pressure. The room fell silent as she considered how to explain the intuitive process that had guided her decision-making in the darkness above Afghanistan. Sir, I memorize terrain features during every mission I fly, she began slowly, organizing her thoughts as she spoke. After 3 deployments and over 400 combat hours in this area of operations, I've developed what you might call a mental map of significant landmarks throughout Helmand and Kandahar provinces. When I arrived at the briefed coordinates, the terrain didn't match what I expected to see at the target location. The investigators exchanged glances that suggested this explanation was both more and less than they had anticipated. More, because it demonstrated an extraordinary level of professional competence that few pilots developed. Less, because it offered no insight into the technical or human factors that had caused the coordinate errors in the first place. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez leaned forward with obvious pride in his subordinate's capabilities, but his expression remained cautious as he considered the broader implications of her explanation. Ghost, are you telling me you navigated to the correct target using memory alone, without reference to GPS or other electronic navigation systems? Not exactly, sir. I used my navigation systems normally, but when the terrain features didn't match my expectations, I cross-referenced my mental map with the tactical situation reports from SEAL Team 7. Their radio transmissions described geographic features that matched my memory of a different location, one that was 17 degrees offset from the briefed coordinates. The precision of her geographic memory was becoming apparent to everyone in the room, but it also raised questions about why she had developed such unusual capabilities. The legal officer asked whether her navigation techniques had been taught in formal training programs or developed through personal initiative. Ghost's response revealed the personal history that had shaped her extraordinary abilities. I grew up on my grandmother's ranch in Montana, learning to navigate by landmarks because GPS doesn't work in the mountain valleys where we ran cattle. She taught me that technology can fail, but the land remains constant. When I started flying military missions, I applied the same principles, memorizing terrain features as backup navigation in case electronic systems failed. The room fell silent as the investigators absorbed this insight into Captain Nakamura's background. Her navigation techniques hadn't emerged from military training or classified intelligence access, but from childhood experiences on a cattle ranch where self-reliance was a survival skill. The revelation transformed the investigation from a search for security breaches into recognition of extraordinary professional competence. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez broke the silence with a question that addressed the core issue underlying the entire incident. Ghost, do you believe you made the right decision when you chose to engage coordinates that differed from your official orders? Her response came without hesitation. Yes, sir. 8 Americans are alive because I trusted my training and experience over malfunctioning technology. I would make the same decision again under identical circumstances. The legal officer closed his notebook with a gesture that suggested the formal questioning phase had concluded. Captain Nakamura, based on this preliminary interview and the supporting mission data, I see no grounds for disciplinary action against you. Your tactical decision-making appears to have been sound, and your actions prevented what could have been a tragic friendly fire incident. But the OSI investigator's expression remained serious as he addressed the broader implications of the coordinate errors. Ma'am, we need your continued cooperation as we investigate how those erroneous coordinates entered the mission planning system. The precision of the 17-degree offset suggests either systematic technical failure or deliberate sabotage, and your insight into the tactical situation may be crucial for determining which. Ghost nodded acknowledgement while processing the implications of his statement. If the coordinate errors had been deliberate sabotage, her decision to trust personal experience over official intelligence might have prevented not just friendly fire casualties, but a successful enemy operation designed to turn American air power against American forces. The meeting concluded with instructions for Ghost to remain available for additional questioning, while maintaining normal flight operations pending the completion of the investigation. As she left the conference room, Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez placed a hand on her shoulder with a gesture that conveyed both professional respect and personal concern for her well-being. Ghost, what you did out there took exceptional skill and considerable courage. Don't let the investigation process make you second-guess decisions that saved American lives. His words provided emotional support during a period when institutional procedures might otherwise leave her feeling isolated and uncertain about her future. The walk back to the Squadron Operations Center felt different than her earlier journey to the conference room. Instead of moving toward uncertain consequences, she was returning to the familiar environment of mission planning and aircraft preparation with her career intact and her reputation enhanced by the morning's revelations. Other pilots approached her with questions and congratulations as word spread about the successful outcome of her interrogation, but Ghost found herself emotionally exhausted by the intensity of the past several hours. The adrenaline that had sustained her through combat and subsequent investigation was fading, leaving behind the profound weariness that followed high-stress operations. Captain Elena Torch Vasquez, her roommate and closest friend in the squadron, appeared at her elbow with a cup of coffee and the knowing expression of someone who had waited through the entire morning for news about the investigation's outcome. "So, are you a hero or a criminal today?" she asked with the dark humor that sustained military personnel through difficult periods. "Apparently, I'm just a pilot with a good memory and questionable judgment about following orders," Ghost replied, accepting the coffee with gratitude that went beyond the simple gesture. Having someone who understood the pressures of combat flying made the transition back to normal operations significantly easier. Torch's expression grew more serious as she considered the broader implications of the morning's events. "You know they're going to want you to testify about this coordinate thing, right? If somebody's deliberately feeding bad intel to aircrew, that's a pretty big deal for all of us." The observation forced Ghost to confront aspects of the situation she had been avoiding during the formal interviews. Her decision to trust personal navigation over official coordinates had revealed a potential security breach that threatened every pilot flying combat missions in the theater. The investigation would likely expand far beyond her individual actions to examine the entire intelligence distribution system. Over the following week, Ghost found herself at the center of the most comprehensive operational security investigation the base had experienced in recent memory. Technical analysts examined every computer system involved in coordinate transmission. Intelligence officers reviewed all personnel with access to mission planning data, and counterintelligence specialists looked for signs of enemy penetration into coalition information networks. The breakthrough came not from sophisticated technical analysis, but from Ghost's continued cooperation in reconstructing the events of that night over Sangin Valley. During her fourth detailed interview, She mentioned that the coordinate offset had been exactly 17 degrees, a precision that seemed too specific for random equipment failure. The lead investigator's reaction to this detail suggested it had special significance. "Captain, 17 degrees corresponds to the angular difference between true north and magnetic north in this region of Afghanistan. Are you certain the offset was exactly that amount?" Ghost confirmed her observation, explaining that her navigation training had made her particularly sensitive to angular measurements, and that the precision of the coordinate error had been one factor in her decision to question the official intelligence. The revelation provided investigators with a crucial insight into the source of the problem. Technical analysis subsequently revealed that someone had deliberately configured the mission planning computers to apply magnetic declination corrections twice, once during initial coordinate calculation, and again during transmission formatting. The result was systematic coordinate errors that would have remained undetectable without highly specific geographic knowledge like Ghost's terrain memorization. The discovery led to the identification and arrest of a contracted intelligence analyst who had been providing Taliban forces with advance warning of coalition operations by ensuring that air support would arrive at the wrong locations. His sabotage had been responsible for numerous failed missions and indirectly caused several American casualties when expected air support failed to materialize at critical moments. Ghost's intuitive recognition of the coordinate discrepancy had not only prevented friendly fire casualties, but had uncovered a sophisticated enemy intelligence operation that had been compromising coalition air operations for several months. The revelation transformed her from a pilot who had disobeyed orders into a national security asset whose exceptional abilities had prevented significant damage to military operations. The formal recognition came 3 weeks later during a ceremony attended by senior commanders from multiple coalition nations. Ghost received the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary achievement in aerial flight, but the citation's generic language about exceptional navigational skills and tactical decision-making under pressure gave no hint of the specific actions that had earned the decoration. Standing at attention while the base commander read the citation, Ghost reflected on the unexpected path that had led from her grandmother's cattle ranch to this moment of recognition. The navigation skills learned during Montana winters had somehow prepared her for making life-and-death decisions in the skis above Afghanistan, creating connections across time and geography that seemed almost mystical in their precision. But the medal ceremony also marked the beginning of a new phase in her military career that would be shaped by the extraordinary capabilities she had demonstrated. Senior leaders began requesting her input on intelligence verification procedures, navigation training programs, and operational security protocols that could prevent similar coordinate sabotage in the future. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez approached her after the ceremony with news that would define her immediate future. "Ghost, there's a position opening at the weapons school that could use someone with your particular talents. They want an instructor pilot who can teach advanced navigation techniques to the next generation of combat aviators." The assignment represented both recognition of her abilities and removal from direct combat operations at a time when her unique skills were most needed in theater. Ghost understood the complex motivations behind the offer, protecting a valuable asset while utilizing her expertise to improve overall force capabilities. But accepting would mean leaving the squadron that had become her military family. Her decision came not from career considerations, but from recognition of her responsibility to prevent other pilots from facing the impossible choices she had confronted over Sangin Valley. If she could teach even one aviator to trust their instincts over technology when systems failed, her experience would have value beyond the specific lives saved on that particular night. The transfer to Nellis Air Force Base marked the end of Ghost's combat flying career, but the beginning of her influence on military aviation training doctrine. Her courses on advanced navigation techniques became legendary within the weapons school, not just for their technical content, but for their emphasis on developing the intuitive decision-making skills that had saved 8 American lives in the darkness above Afghanistan. Years later, when former students encountered navigation system failures or questionable intelligence during their own combat missions, many would hear Ghost's voice reminding them that technology served the pilot, not the reverse. Her legacy lived on in the decisions made by aviators who had learned to trust their training, their experience, and their instincts when official systems pointed them in the wrong direction. The final report of the coordinate sabotage investigation remained classified, but its conclusions fundamentally changed how the military approached intelligence verification and operational security. Ghost's actions had revealed vulnerabilities that extended far beyond a single compromised analyst, forcing systemic changes designed to prevent similar infiltration of critical command and control systems. Captain Kestrel Ghost. Nakamura's name appeared in no history books, her photograph hung in no halls of fame, and her story remained known only to the small community of aviators and special operators who understood its significance. But in the end, that anonymity seemed appropriate for someone whose greatest achievement had been preventing a tragedy that would have been all too visible if she had chosen to follow orders instead of her conscience. The coordinates on her final flight plan took her home to Montana, where the same mountains that had taught her to navigate by landmarks still stood unchanged by the passage of time and the weight of global events. As her civilian aircraft descended toward the small airport near her grandmother's ranch, Ghost reflected that perhaps the most important navigation had not been through hostile airspace, but through the moral complexity of making the right choice when the cost of being wrong was measured in American lives. The airstrip looked exactly as she remembered it, carved into a mountain valley where GPS signals still failed, and pilots still needed to read the land itself to find their way home. It was the perfect place for someone whose greatest accomplishment had been trusting the landscape over the technology, the wisdom of experience over the authority of systems, the responsibility of individual conscience over the comfort of institutional obedience. Ghost taxied her aircraft to the same hangar where she had first dreamed of flying, completing a circle that connected her childhood fascination with aviation to the moment when those dreams had collided with the harsh realities of combat decision-making. The ranch that had shaped her extraordinary navigation abilities waited beyond the hangar doors, unchanged by the years and unaware of the lives that had been saved by the skills learned in its mountain valleys. As she shut down the engine and completed her final post-flight checklist, Captain Nakamura allowed herself a moment to appreciate the profound connections that had shaped her military career. The coordinates that mattered most had not been measured in degrees and minutes of latitude and longitude, but in the moral bearings that guided a pilot's decision to trust personal responsibility over institutional authority when American lives hung in the balance. The investigation files would eventually be archived in secure facilities where they would remain classified for decades to come. But the real monument to Ghost's actions lived in the 8 American operators who had returned home because she chose to trust her memory over her instruments on a dark night above Sangin Valley. Their survival represented coordinates that could never be corrupted by enemy sabotage or technical malfunction. The intersection of individual courage with professional competence that defined the best traditions of military service. Years would pass before the full significance of her decision became clear, as former students applied the navigation principles she had taught during their own moments of crisis and uncertainty. Each time a pilot chose experience over technology, instinct over authority, or personal responsibility over institutional protection, Ghost's influence continued shaping events in ways that could never be measured or recognized through formal channels. The sun was setting behind the same peaks that had taught her to read the landscape during childhood, painting the sky in familiar shades of gold and crimson that connected her homecoming to thousands of sunrises observed from aircraft cockpits around the world. But this sunset was different. It marked the end of a military career that had been defined by a single moment when intuitive navigation had prevented tragedy and revealed the extraordinary capabilities that can emerge when individual excellence meets impossible circumstances. Captain Kestrel Ghost, Nakamura walked away from her aircraft for the final time, carrying with her the quiet satisfaction of a mission completed and a duty faithfully discharged. The coordinates that had once seemed so crucial, the GPS readings and target locations that had shaped her combat operations, faded in importance compared to the simple bearing that pointed toward home and the family ranch where her extraordinary journey had begun. The story of the pilot who had trusted memory over technology, experience over authority, and conscience over convenience would live on in the classified files and informal traditions of military aviation. But its most important legacy existed in the lives of 8 Americans who had survived, because someone had possessed the courage to disobey orders when obedience would have meant tragedy, and the skill to navigate by instinct when technology failed at the moment of greatest need. In the end, the wrong coordinates had revealed the right pilot, someone whose extraordinary abilities had been shaped not by military training or classified intelligence, but by childhood experiences on a Montana ranch where reading the land was a survival skill and trusting personal judgment over official systems meant the difference between finding the way home and being lost forever in mountain valleys where technology could not penetrate.